we have to do a very important award, which is the best team in the AFC is 8-6 award, which we're giving to the Buffalo Bills. How about that?
Yeah, they are the best team in the AFC. Like I feel really good about that. I think I would pick them to beat any other team in the AFC right now, and I believe that they would be favored against any other team if they were at home. On the road, I'm not so sure.
Even the Ravens?
If the Bills, if it's in Buffalo, they were just favored against the Cowboys. And they beat them by 30. So, yeah, look, I feel comfortable saying that the Bills are the best team in the AFC, and they probably won't make the playoffs.
So they spanked the Cowboys. That was never once not for one moment was it close. So even when it was 0-0, it was not close.
The Bills won 31-10, but to Craig's point, it was really 31-3, and then the Cowboys kind of scored a touchdown to save
cheap
face.
Garbage touchdown. Do you think this was a worse loss for Dallas or a better win for Buffalo?
I think it was I think it was a better win for Buffalo because the reality is, didn't Dallas clinch a playoff spot anyway, even though they lost? It's like the reality is Dallas had an uphill path for any of this mattering because even though they beat the Eagles last week, the Eagles can kind of just win out against their crappy schedule and like get the NFC East win anyway. And the problem for Dallas is that they're averaging 40 points per game at home, but they're probably going to get the wild card and have to play a road game. They're averaging 18 points per game on the road. But Buffalo, even with this win, Buffalo still has to at least go 3-1 down the stretch to make the playoffs. And they probably have to just run the table. So this was huge for Buffalo because even if Buffalo doesn't make it, we're going to be like, wow, they're probably the best team in the AFC anyway.
Yeah.
If you guys had to power rank the league, you guys do power rankings every week. Where are the Bills right now, you think? And the 8-6 Bills?
I had them in the top 5 coming into this week. The 49ers are clearly first to me. I think if you put the Ravens at second, I don't see an argument to put the Bills lower than 3.
Yeah, that's where I've got them right now. I hope the Ravens just maybe like a coin flip above them. The Ravens dominated the Jags on Sunday Night Football. We're not going to get into that game, but that was a pretty impressive performance. Lamar is really dialed in right now, so I think they're a really good team. I think the Ravens defense might be better than the Bills
Ravens defense is definitely
more balanced, better,
But I think it's worth noting that I think that this is true for Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes with the MVP stuff, which at this point, it's not even worth going into the MVP. Obviously, Dak was, he was the co-favorite Purdy. Dak had a terrible game. Purdy played great. We'll see if Purdy becomes the favorite, especially with Tyreek Hill. He didn't play, so it's like he's going to get 2,000 yards or not. But with Josh Allen and Mahomes, it's like there's a couple plays where you're like, if they just go differently, where nothing Mahomes or Allen did changes, we think about them totally different. You think about the Bills. Again, Jake Elliott, the kicker for the Eagles, that Bills-Eagles game makes a 61-yarder in terrible weather,
right,
to prolong that game. The Bills almost beat the Eagles and the Cowboys this season. I think we would think very differently of this Bills team if they had beaten the Bills and the Cowboys in the last month. So it kind of like after everyone kind of gave up on the Bills, they were exactly as good as we thought they were.
I think I'm the most impressed with their defense. I think we all knew that the offense was solid and that, their point differential was incredible. Josh Allen is playing really well despite some turnover stuff. But they essentially held Dallas to 3 points for the majority of the game other than a garbage time touchdown. And Dallas was humming. They were the most potent offense in the league other than the Niners. And Dak was the runaway MVP candidate, in my opinion, until this game. And I think the Bills defense literally derailed Dak Prescott's MVP campaign and handed it off to Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
Can we shout out real quick before we move on from the Bills, James Cook? I want to talk about him really quickly because I think he's been a big part of their ability to run the ball and be a little more balanced than they were early in the season is playing a big part in their sort of renaissance over the last few games.
Yeah, it's worth noting they ran the ball 45 times today. The Bills ran the ball 45 times and they threw it 15 times against Dallas.
Josh Allen had 7 completions in this game. 7.
And they dismantled the Cowboys.
Yeah. So James Cook, 25 rushes, 179 yards and a touchdown. And then he added 2 catches for 42 yards and a touchdown. I think that's the second straight game he's had a touchdown reception. He's just playing extremely well right now. And so I wanted to shout him out. I've always kind of thought he looks good in short spurts, but they're finally giving him sort of like a featured role in this offense. He is right now 3rd in the NFL in scrimmage yards, which is wild to me. 1,400 scrimmage yards right now, behind only CMC and I believe Tyreek. I can't remember off the top of my head. I had looked it up earlier. But yeah, he has 31 rushes of 10 plus yards, which is second only to Christian McCaffrey. So he's an explosive runner. I think he is sort of a really good fit for their offense because they create space. and kind of give him like these like delayed handoffs, these draw plays, and he's just really good at like sort of slicing through the defense. I don't know. I just think James Cook is coming on and he's like looking like a star.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bills came into this season wanting to run the ball. Like the Bills lost last year to the Bengals, and in part because it was snowing and they just couldn't. They were so out physicaled, and the Bills wanted to be a physical run. I think in some ways this is the game that Buffalo's wanted to win the way they wanted to win it for kind of like 2 years. They wanted to run the clock out and run it down the throat. And also when the Cowboys lost to the Cardinals in week 3, like they dominated the Giants 40-0 in week 1. And then I think week 2, 3, the Dallas just lost to the Cardinals. We were like, what happened? Cardinals ran it down the Cowboys' throat, and the Cowboys are kind of bullies, but they get a huge lead on you and you have to pass. But if you can take the lead in Dallas and run it, that's like the weakness in Dallas's team. It really is when you make Micah Parsons not have to just rush the passer, especially DeMarcus Lawrence too. So
totally. Yeah.
But to Craig's point, I think you're right, Craig, because the flip side is for fair or not, whatever. The Brock Purdy MVP thing, it is becoming a perfect storm because the 49ers were incredible. The 49ers beat the Cardinals 45-29 today. The first half was close. The second half was not close to close. Like it was just the 49ers offense in this, it was a hot knife through butter, feels super fair. But Brock Purdy he left. I was worried he was concussed. The defender like ran into him. It was crazy. But Brock Purdy, I think they called it a shoulder injury. He left. Didn't look like it bothered him at all. Purdy completed 16 of 25 passes for 242 yards, 4 touchdown passes, no sacks, no picks. And then Craig and DK, you guys kept passing or texting back and forth. And Craig is just like, Brock Purdy has 4 touchdowns every single week and nobody
every
cares.
Week.
It's
become so routine that no one cares. Oh, what did Brock Purdy do? Oh, 310, 4 touchdowns, no turnovers. Oh,
just
Niners won by 30.
A sweat. Does he ever
Okay.
look like tired to you, or like he just is the most like monotone?
He looks like
never
he's throwing to his kids
expression.
in the backyard.
Just lobbing it up. There was a touchdown pass early in the game where Deebo Samuel had 12 yards of separation according to Next Gen Stats. Love to see that.
McCaffrey was so open on a touchdown that he had time to catch it, fall down, get back up, and run into the end zone.
It wasn't even like the smoothest get up either. Like it took him way longer than
he
you'd
labored.
think a guy like Christian McCaffrey would get up and start running. But anyway, Brock Purdy now has the league's most touchdown passes, 29 touchdown passes, number 1 in the NFL.
Yep. And he has 7 interceptions.
Just 4 touchdowns every week. Like it's nothing.
Just every single week he has 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's also second in the league in passing yards. I don't know.
I don't even want to fall into the trap of whether Purdy is the MVP or not. The Niners offense is absolutely incredible. And the whole thing works together so perfectly. It's honestly insane just the way it works with like McCaffrey be able to just be the best running back, especially now that Nick Chubb is hurt. McCaffrey's like the best in between the tackles runner. I swear to God, but he's also the best receiving back in the NFL. And George Kittle is George Kittle, but he also can block and all these guys can play these different positions. The fact that Deebo Samuel is Deebo Samuel and went in motion and got as open as he was. Kyle Shanahan, it's like he's playing Madden, but he actually knows how Madden works. And he's like Cardale Jones. And every defensive coordinator he faces is that kid in the hospital. The Cardale
he's playing
Jones
on easy mode.
7. Yeah.
Shanahan's playing on easy mode.
I think I saw the stat, and I'm sorry if I'm incorrect on this, but I believe Deebo Samuel has 20 touches, or he has 7 touchdowns in his last 20 touches. Like, that's pretty good, like, efficiency. Just keep going like that, man.
The Niners are so clearly the best team in the league that don't you think it's kind of like if they don't win the Super Bowl, I'm not even going to award like whoever, if another team wins other than the Niners, I'm going to look back on this year and completely discount that win because I'm going to say the Niners were clearly the best team in the league. And it's funny because I don't think, in my opinion, correct me if you guys disagree. This is probably the most dominant team, especially offensively, we've seen since what? The Manning Broncos, 2015? Who lost in the Super Bowl?
The 2018, the Chiefs and the Rams in 2018 were pretty out of control. That felt insane at the time. And then they had the 54-51 game. But the Niners have this total ability of play. I think that's kind of the difference to me where they feel is that you're kind of like, what's the weakness here? And it's like, I guess their defensive tackles are hurt. So they might not be able to stop the run if they have to. I mean, I think the fact that the Niners defense completely separately is also like maybe in a game-to-game situation could be the best defense in the NFL is just like crazy. Like the fact that they can run the ball and run out the clock. They can score on 3 plays if they have to. But then also they have Nick Bosa as one of the best pass rushers, and Fred Warner's like maybe the best linebacker in the league. Like they just have so many things.
So, Craig, to your point though, just like and Heifetz really like overall team quality. I saw this tweet from Aaron Schatz last week. The 49ers are the number 5 best team ever, tracked by DVOA through 13 games. And then this is last week. And then they scored
DVOA
41.
goes back like 50 years.
Yeah. So like might as well call it ever. And then now they won like 41-25, and like DVOA awards like blowouts, I think a little bit more just because when you're that dominant, like the DVOA goes up. And so like, this is legitimately, to your point, one of the best teams ever, like period.
And on that note, we also have to give an award to the only actually great fantasy player award. The only good player in fantasy football award is Christian McCaffrey.
He's the one.
Yeah. DK said that earlier, and I thought it was so funny. He was like, Christian McCaffrey's the only good fantasy football player. And that's correct. Honestly, it's pretty much correct. Maybe Tyreek Hill, but it's just like the essence of what you're saying. I totally understand. He's just the only one who's the best.
McCaffrey had 187 yards from scrimmage today. He had 3 touchdowns, including the aforementioned so open that he fell down and then got up and ran into the end zone really awkwardly. He had 42 points in full PPR scoring. And I think that what's funny about it is forget point per reception. Christian McCaffrey was like barely behind the pace for a point per minute in this game.
Right.
He had 29 PPR points through 32 minutes. I think he had like 39 points through like 43 minutes. Like he was so close to a point per minute way later in the game than you should ever have something like that. Like he had 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 plays into the second half. And I have, there's statistical arguments, but then I also keep thinking about, I really do believe that Christian McCaffrey, and there's so many parts of this offense, I think he really is the best, like player talent, scheme, surrounding talent, coaching. It's the best marriage of all that since Randy Moss and the Patriots. And I don't even know what the third player would be in my lifetime. DK, you've been watching football longer. Like I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but McCaffrey on this team feels iconic in a way that we will like not allow people to just like compare other players to him. Like he's going to be in this like special box.
I mean, there's definitely other guys that come to my mind, like Sean Alexander in 2005 when he rushed, like he won the MVP that year. I'm sure there's Adrian Peterson seasons. I'm sure there's LaDainian Tomlinson seasons, but like recently, it's certainly in the last like 10 years, this is like a pretty unique situation for him to shine. He kind of, I was just thinking when you were talking about him, Craig, he's sort of like the LeBron of fantasy, where it's like every year he just puts up the most ludicrous numbers. It's almost to the point where we're dull. We don't even recognize anymore. It's like he scores like 3 touchdowns and it's like no big deal. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, oh, that's normal. He scored 40 points in fantasy today. Like, yeah, that's expected. We thought you would score 41 points. And I was just looking at some of the stats. He is averaging 25 and a half PPR points per game. That's almost 5 points more than the RB2. So almost a touchdown better than the RB2. And the median RB1, so like basically like the middle of like the top group of running backs this year, he's averaging almost 9 points better than that per game. So he's obviously a massive value.
So a 30-yard touchdown per game better
like over another very good player. You know what I mean? Like this is what you're dealing with when you go up against McCaffrey every week. He scored 203 rushing fantasy points this season, which is of course first. And he's also scored 121 receiving fantasy points this season, which is first. He's basically scored the same amount of receiving points only in half PPR as Christian Kirk. He has more fantasy points just from receiving than Drake London, Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Gabe Dave, Deontay Johnson, T. Higgins, like all these like big names that we had coming into the season at receiver. He has more receiving points in fantasy than those guys. So, I mean, again, it's just like, I think we're just numb to it at this point. He's so freaking good every week.
McCaffrey this year is what Travis Kelce was last year. Like how during the offseason, I kept saying that in 2022, Kelce, the gap, because sometimes we get lost, like, oh, it's the fourth player. It's like what you're saying, DK, is that McCaffrey is in a tier of alone, and there's all these like 2 through 8 is their own tier in tier 2. And like last year, Kelce, the gap between number 1 tight end Kelce, number 2 Hawkinson was the same as the gap between number 2 Hawkinson and 22 Mike Gesicki. This year, the gap between Christian McCaffrey at number 1 running back and Raheem Mostert at number 2 running back in fantasy is bigger than the gap between Raheem Mostert at number 2 and Jalen Warren for the Steelers at 22.
Wow.
That's how incredible McCaffrey's been this year.
God, man.